Hello! Happy September. I'm August. I know. I hope you all are doing really well. Thank you so incredibly much for being here. I hope you're having a great start to September. August was a whirlwind. It went by so incredibly fast, and I managed to read 5 really wonderful books that I would love to chat about. This is just going to be a chatty little wrap up. I hope you can be cozy and we can hang out and talk about some books. So let's get started. The first book was actually an audiobook that I read in August, and this is The Hurricane Girl by Marcy Demansky. This was a really interesting summer read, and I feel like I would have had a completely different experience if I read this book versus audibly listening to it. So this follows our main protagonist named Allison. We find out very quickly that she has recently moved to North Carolina on the beach and has a summer house there, and she moved so she can just go swimming. She left an abusive ex and just moved, bought this house, and within the first few pages or minutes of listening, you find out that a hurricane came through and completely demolished her house, and it's the only one that is gone. So she is left with this pile of rubble basically that was her home, but she had only been in the home for a week, so she has absolutely no idea where to go or what to do. This writing style is so interesting. It is intentionally rudimentary. It is intentionally repetitive. It feels claustrophobic in that sense with this writing style. It feels like a child wrote it. You know, when a child is writing a story and they keep using the main character's name over and over and over again in a third person way. Sarah did this, and then she looked up and Sarah saw that. It's very redundant. The premise of this book then follows the wild whirlwind that Allison finds herself in post-hurricane dilemma. Her relationship with her mother, her relationship with her brother, these interesting romantic relationships that she finds, and yet it's not quite a rom-com. It's definitely literary fiction, but it also has this on the precipice of almost being a psychological horror, because there's a lot of suspense of what's going to happen. Is this going to turn into a horror based on this main character's decision making and lack thereof? And throughout the novel, I was just personally getting, and this might just be because of my own research and diving really deep into neurodiversity studies lately, but this felt very autistic coded to me. If you're not familiar with what that means, it basically happens very often in media in general, in the entertainment industry with movies, cinema, shows, books, manic pixie dream girl vibes. There are a lot of characters in the media that we consume that are autistic coded, and no one ever outright says, oh yes, they are autistic. And this character felt like it. She eats the same thing every single day. All she ever wants to do is swim. She can swim forever without getting exhausted or tired or bored. That is her one favorite thing that she wants to do in the world. She has a very taciturn relationship with her brother, where every time she speaks, her brother seems to be mad at her, and she doesn't understand why. What did she say? She can often come across as very blunt, but she's also incredibly confused majority of the time. She does not know why things are happening. She doesn't understand what she should be doing and how to interact with other people and what is expected of her. But the author, once again, never addressed that. Some things also happen in the book though, including her having a physical injury that definitely could have impacted her motor skills and her thinking. But the way that I interpreted this book is that she already had these pre-existing things. She moved to this beach house so she could go swimming and eat ham sandwiches every single day. I mean, that sounds great. I just thought it was really interesting. I think if I read this book, I would not have enjoyed the writing style. Having someone read it out loud to me definitely made it more accessible and didn't feel as infuriating to read the same sentences over and over and over again, because our character does go through a brain injury thing, and she gets really cyclical with her thoughts and her wording, and she is just stuck in this loop of thinking, which is also common with autism, is getting really stuck in these ruminating thoughts and spiraling really easily and can't get out of a thought pattern. So I thought it was interesting. It didn't linger with me. Kind of forgot I read it. I was happy it was over with. It personally wasn't my favorite, but if you're looking for a summer beach read, literary fiction, very easy to ingest, very accessible, I'd recommend it. I thought it was very quirky. It was very different. So kudos to that for being different. Next, I did listen to Death in Her Hands by Otessa Moshfegh. I talked about this one more in depth in one of my vlogs, so I will link that down below if you are curious about some more in-depth thoughts in the moment of me reading it. I listened to this while I was out traveling, and it was like the 1 week that it felt like fall in August. This is my first Moshfegh that I've read. I was very nervous because there's so much hype around this author. I was very nervous I'd be disappointed, and I was not, which is amazing. Honestly, it's honestly amazing to have your expectations like met. This follows our main character named Vesta. She's an older woman. I believe she's in her 60s or 70s. She's widowed, she lives alone with her dog, and while she's out in the forest one day, she finds a note on the ground that says something along the lines of, her name was Magda, no one will ever know what killed her, but I didn't do it. And she is immediately sent into like, this is reality, like this is true. Somebody did kill Magda. And she's like, no, it could just be a note. She goes, but I think someone did kill Magda. Who was Magda? And she takes us on this journey as she begins to personify Magda as a real person. And we can visualize who this character is based on Vesta's interpretation of who she would be, where she's from, the relationships she's had, potential murderers, like who killed her. She is creating this narrative out of thin air, but we are so drawn into it and it becomes her reality. And it was one of those books that was so amazing to listen to. The audiobook narrator was phenomenal. And it was such a journey because no matter what route you could take with interpreting this book, like there are so many options. You could interpret it in so many ways. Some of it could be like the power of your own brain and the narratives you create and not being able to discern reality from the things that you think up in your mind. Where your emotions lead you versus reality and facts and logic. It could also be about the power of narrative being a very empowering thing to give a story to those who don't have a story, specifically around women or women who are potentially murdered or overlooked, or older women like our main character Vesta, who are slowly like forgotten through society and lose value because they've just been overlooked. And there are so many things about identity through this that I thought was really, really fascinating. I loved diving deeper into what identity means and how you can actually cultivate an identity for others. We tend to do that anyway, if you think about it psychologically. Like all the people in my life, like I have identities for them. They have traits that I can discern them from others. But how much of that is just my interpretation of them and what I experience, because I don't see their day-to-day life. But anyway, yeah, I could go on and on about this. I thought it was really, really interesting. I thought it was cozy to listen to. I thought it was fun. I love the writing style. It did not become a new favorite of all time, which is fine, but it was absolutely incredible. I would love to read more Moshfegh soon. That would be amazing. I think that there's so much to unravel with this. If I had a physical copy, I definitely would have been annotating a lot. So maybe in the future, maybe not, but I just really enjoyed it. Like, I really enjoyed it. An unintentional theme, I guess, that I had in August was a lot about female identity, specifically female, but it could be interpreted as just like identity as a whole. But I read from female authors, female perspectives, and it was a lot about identity. And for that, like, August was such a great reading month for me because I love analyzing that topic and that concept and really diving into identity and where it comes from and how it can be stripped away from you and how you can rebuild it and the power of words and narrative and story. So along that same line, I then read a book called Under Gemini by Rosamund Pilcher. I have another vlog, same with that other vlog. I talk about this one in it. And this was my pick for like a really fun, easy, cozy book. And I described it as like drinking a really warm cup of tea because it is so cozy, so calming. This takes place in Scotland on this manor called Fernrig, and it follows our main protagonist Flora. She's in her early 20s. She leaves her home in Cornwall, England to go to London to like start her life, and when she's in London she meets her twin sister, and she did not know she had a twin, so things happen. Her twin sister Rose is like, you should stay in my flat in London, I'm gonna go to Greece. Didn't really tell her much. She leaves, and then Flora answers the door one day when someone was knocking, and it ends up being Rose's ex-fiance, like very recent ex-fiance, that she just left him to go to Greece. And Flora has no idea what's happening. The ex-fiance's name is Anthony, and he tells Flora, like, I didn't know Rose had a twin, but my grandmother is ill. She's not doing well. I told my grandmother that I would bring Rose to Fernrig, her manor that she lives at, as kind of like one last visit, but no one wants to talk about Tuppy, the grandmother, dying, and Flora is like, I can't do that. That's not morally okay. I'm not going to pretend to be Rose, and I'm not going to lie to an old lady. And then she eventually is convinced. And then they jet set off to Scotland, and she meets the family, and everyone is likable. If you like Ted Lasso, if you like the show Rosemary and Thyme, if you like cozy British mystery murders, like, this was so cozy. It was originally written in the 70s. I don't know why I said it like that. I think it's the 60s or 70s. 1976. Flora pretends to be Rose, and she doesn't really find it that difficult because thankfully no one at the house really knew Rose to begin with. But we discover that some of the people in the town have met Rose before and have had salacious goings on. And Rose is actually not a very likable person, and Flora finds that out based on how she's treated by other people, but she can't tell them, no, I'm not Rose. So again, this power of narrative, of like identity and coming across one way, but you know you're not, and having to lie and be deceitful. And what's the altruism in that? Like, yes, you are helping this older woman make her dreams come true of seeing her grandson and her future granddaughter-in-law, but at what cost? And I thought it was so interesting. And then things happened, but I loved how human this book was. It was very humanizing to these characters. They all had like really good personalities and were very likable. Even the people you didn't like, they felt real. They were very tangible characters, which I thought was amazing. I just really enjoyed it. I thought it was so fun and so good. I must resituate myself here. The downfall for sure is 1976 casual sexism. Romance being like, I'm the masculine macho man, let me grab your hand and yank you around through a restaurant, and you're gonna say something mean and I'm just gonna slap you. Like, so didn't like that. Didn't like the age gap between the romance that started happening at the end. I didn't think that this would be a romance, and then it just like, whoo, we went right into it. I was like, oh, I didn't know that this was where that was going, but that's okay, I guess. I'm not a romance reader myself. So with it ending into like a weird age gap romance, casual sexism, acceptable sexism, quote unquote, for the time period, like, I was not a fan of that personally, like at all. Did not like that. So it was so fun though. It was so cozy. I enjoyed it. I found this in a little free library. I'm so happy I read it. I thought it was really fun. So there we go. My feet are completely numb. After that, I found a book, and now I can't remember where I found it. I think I found it in a little free library. I'm not sure, but I immediately just started reading it because I was like, this is too cute. I must ingest it with my eyeballs immediately. That is Snapdragon by Kat Lee. This is a graphic novel. You can find friends in the strangest places. This is so cute. Oh my gosh. If you're a fan of Tea Dragon Society series, this is really, really cute. And the illustrations are gorgeous and it's beautiful. And I read it all in one sitting on my front porch in the sun, and I cried. I could tell you why, but I don't want to spoil anything, but there was like a little bit of like a twist in here that was so endearing and heartwarming. And I loved that so many of these characters were queer, were trans, without it being like a big deal. It was just like accepted. Love that. Love seeing it just being normalized. And it just had this whimsy. So we're following this main character named Snapdragon. This is her. And she lives with her mom, and she's a little bit of an outcast. She doesn't have very many friends. She gets made fun of. She's more of a tomboy. There were always rumors that there was like a witch in her town, and she ends up meeting the witch. I don't want to give too much away because it's so worth it to read and then like find out what happened. It's just so beautiful. But basically with a witch comes like the normal witchy, like, oh, they're so spooky, so scary, they can do scary things. And then you find out like this witch in particular picks up roadkill, which already like getting me misty, anything about animals and death and but then things happen and it's just beautiful. And I I really can't spoil anything, but like it was just so beautiful and about like family and acceptance and love and found family and queer love and queer joy. And oh my god, it was just so cute. So sweet, and animals and like the power of energy and spirits, and like I just thought it was so good. And then there were references at the very end to like Halloween, which was great, you know, getting into that feeling a little bit, getting a little bit into that fall spirit. I really liked this. I liked this a lot. Like I would love to reread it now that I know where it was going and what it was doing. Like it was so sweet. Like, just, I highly recommend this. Like, warmed my heart so much, and it made me cry. But Tea Dragon Society, I think it's the second book, also made me cry when I read it. Sometimes there are books that just like come into your life, like something as sweet and saccharine as like a cute graphic novel. I mean, this one definitely had like a little bit of gore. It has a little bit of like spooky elements, but I would still consider it like YA. But they hit, man, they hit like a nerve. Like colors are just like really fun. It gets you in the emotions. It pulls on your heartstrings. I really liked it, so I recommend it for September if you want to read something really good and sweet, a little spooky. Highly recommend. Lastly, I read The Woman Destroyed by Simone de Beauvoir. I'm gonna go on a little bit of a rant tangent, hence why I want this to be candid, but there are harder topics in this for sure that I'm gonna talk about. It might get a little tangenty, it might get a little deep, because this is profound, to say the least. So Simone de Beauvoir was a French existentialist. English translation was copyrighted in 1969. It looks like it was originally published in France in 1967. So there are 3 stories in here. There's The Age of Discretion, The Monologue, and The Woman Destroyed. And for each one, I did annotate for each story. So I would love to share my annotations and really, really just talk about this. I could have had like a whole video about me reading this, but honestly, it was so deep and dense and I flew through it and I was annotating a lot. This book is just absolutely covered with underlining and writing and a lot about, again, female identity, like especially cis woman identity. I resonated with it too deeply. I know that this is a wrap up, but I'm going to be talking the most about this one for sure. So if you've been following me for a long time, several summers ago, I read The Pisces by Melissa Broder, and I talked about how BookTube, and I'm not on Book Talk, I'll never be on Book Talk, you will not catch me on Book Talk. There's this lack of like talking about why a book made you feel a certain way. I can come on this channel all day long and be like, I loved this, it was so good. I loved this, it was so good. But like getting to the root of why art is so subjective, and the meaning and intention and purpose that we put behind what we read and why we enjoy it isn't talked about. And I think it is because it's taboo. It's because it's very vulnerable. And a few summers ago, when I was reading The Pisces by Melissa Broder, I talked about this. I talked about how not everyone will get that book. Not everyone will understand the books that I rate 5 stars or are my favorite or made me emotional because they have not lived my experience. I think we need to bring back personal narrative when we're talking about why we enjoyed a book. Because I think when we connect to an author or writing or characters, it's because there is a piece of us that resonates with it, that we can see ourselves in it. And I think the piece that is lacking on BookTube is talking about why. Why does that piece speak to you? Why does it resonate with you? And we don't have to like totally emotionally trauma dump onto YouTube and talk about why, but I think really getting into the nitty gritty of like what chord does it strike for you is very imperative. And I think that's something that we're losing through this like fast fashion-esque media of like book talk and like reading these books that just like come out on a conveyor belt, which is a whole other topic to be talking about because I'm not dissing any of that. I think reading is reading and reading is for pleasure, but it's also for critical thinking, and that's a precursor. So we'll start in chronological order. The Age of Discretion follows a woman in her 60s. She is recently retired, but she's an intellectual. Her husband is a scientist and he is not retired. We start this story off with her talking about how liberating it is to be older, how liberating it is to be retired, how happy she feels in her body, her mind, with her freedom, with her work, because she's still writing and researching and is publishing a book. But she is really worried about her husband, who she's starting to see his age. She's starting to see him slow down and become really apathetic towards his career and not really have that same like joie de vivre and that like passion for life anymore. And the biggest plot thing that happens in the external world is that their adult son comes over with his wife and he says that he's going to leave school and he's not going to pursue teaching anymore, so he's going to leave the world of academia, which rocks our main character to the core. She is so upset because he is now going to pursue the world of politics, which is everything she has stood against, everything that she raised him to be. He is no longer, he is going against her. She feels so like disappointed and angered by this decision and feels like it's a personal attack towards her. And from that, we start to see this book go from this external world about what was happening in her everyday life, these like tangible reality things, to this like very insular, angry, upset, sad, pitiful narrative. And she starts to feel older. So my annotations and digested thoughts about this piece that I wrote at the end was: intention, story, purpose, narrative, and perspective are the things that actually do give life and things meaning. Inherently, memories, objects, activities, relationships, there is no meaning. It is the intention, story, purpose, narrative. Again, that identity, placing an identity, placing your emotions onto an object is what gives it meaning. Which again, to me, so many of these concepts feel so rudimentary and like, yes, duh. That's what a lot of philosophy feels like, because it feels very obvious and apparent, but when you really think about it, it kind of like reinvigorates you a little bit and rejuvenates that passion for life and that zest of like, oh yes, I am in control, even if you feel like your life is totally out of control. The meaning, intention, purpose, story, emotions, opinions that you place on things, they do matter, because without it, what would any of this be? What would any of this be? If I didn't have personal attachment to this book, it means nothing. I don't need, like, literally meaningless. You know what I'm saying? Okay. Indifference equals death. So when it comes to like the relationship portion of all of these stories, because they are following hetero couples, I relate to them so hardcore with my past relationships, my romantic relationships, my friendships, my familial relationships, like all of it. Like it hit, it hit different. It was a core harpoon to the heart, which is what I always say I want. But oi. Indifference is so frustrating. I know we experience bouts and waves of feeling indifferent and apathetic in our own lives, but to perpetually be in a relationship with somebody who is so indifferent and so apathetic and actively choosing not to choose, you know that saying, if you're not choosing, you are choosing. Being with people like that, it's just draining to be around, because they won't choose you. They will never choose you, because they won't even choose themselves. They won't choose this like passion and zest for life. And you can feel indifference. You can feel when someone is like indifferent towards you, and it is so painful. It is so painful. It's like, I feel like a lot of people can relate to this as well when you ask someone that you like or that you're in a relationship with, like, hey, can I come over? And they just say, sure, if you want, instead of saying like, yes, I would love for you to come. It's that feeling. But in these stories, it's like long-term relationships are doing that, which I've also experienced, and it hurts so much. Hence, this is why this is such a tangent and such a long expression. So it is incredibly painful to feel indifference from your partner, to feel like it doesn't matter what you do, how you do it, where you are, they just kind of don't care. Like they're very disconnected from themselves, from the world, and from you. And that apathy is just like, it oozes onto everything. So I definitely felt like I could really relate to this story. Old age comes quicker / you feel older when there is apathy, boredom, and indifference. Intentional action, passion, choice, and perspective can make one feel invigorated and youthful. So choosing to choose. Embracing impermanence is greater than fearing death. Variety, learning, curiosity, and vulnerability are youthful wonders of the world. So always staying sharp, you know, like learning something new, wanting, like not being closed off to the world. The second that you start closing off, like, yeah, you are gonna feel older, you're gonna feel sadder. Keeping your mind open and curious is so challenging and hard and very vulnerable and scary, but it is so important to do. And then also with that is like facing fears. Facing fears, that's gonna keep you feeling young and fresh. Apathy in relationship means not choosing to just get along, quote unquote, and actively trying to just be pleasant and agreeable. But it is fake. This fraud feeling is so deeply unsettling and obviously not real, when witnessed yourself, but you cannot force someone out of apathy. So when someone is just agreeing, you know, sometimes it can come across as like people pleasing, someone who's just so fearful or apathetic. It could be both, could be either, but they're just agreeing to agree, agreeing to make things easier, agreeing to be more palatable, more pleasing. You can feel that. You can feel that fraudulent. Like you're just like, I just want you to want me. I just want you to choose. I want you to want your career and feel passion. And like, where is it? It's painful to experience in a relationship. So that's something I've definitely felt in past relationships. Next story, we have the monologue. I loved this story. I have thought about this one so often since I read it. We are following this unnamed female protagonist and we are in her head. It is a stream of consciousness. It is currently like Christmas or New Year's Eve, something like that, and there's like a party going on upstairs above her. I don't know if she's in like an apartment or something, so she can hear the party. And the story opens up with the silly bastards. She hates everyone. She's really mad at the world. She is angry, she is spiteful, she's resentful, she hates everyone for being loud and having a party. And as this stream of consciousness, like the punctuation is all over the place, her sentences run on forever. It feels so bouncy and jumpy and fragmented, but it makes so much sense. But as the story progresses, we find out like she has experienced extremely horrible trauma. She has gone through some horrific things in her life. And I think it's really interesting to then be like, oh, okay, she's not just being whiny and complaining about everyone and hating everyone, like she has a reason to. There's a rationale behind why she's so angry. And I think that's a really interesting thing to experience and feel as a reader, because you don't need a reason to complain. You don't have to justify your anger and frustration at society and the world and how you've been treated. But it's interesting that like once we find that out, I even had this experience of being like, oh, that makes sense. But inherently being a cis woman and being born and raised as a woman is to know a world that is constantly and never not unsafe, unpredictable, scary, violent. You never feel stable. You never feel completely at ease in your body, in your brain, in your mind, in society. So this felt like the tangible collection and cultivation of those thoughts of being so angry at the world, this feminine rage that is so palpable, and I experience it so often because we are living in a world that was not made for us at all, like at all. And when I'm saying all this too, I'm not trying to exclude anyone. This is just very much my very raw thoughts about this book, philosophical stories and what it's like to be a cis woman. And I know it's a lot. So I think validating the fact that I'm going on a monologue right now and we're talking about this, like this is hard for me to share all of this and to be this candid about my thoughts on society, but also on literature. So like this is new. And terrifying. Anyway, what I wrote for the monologue is being able to see / perceive / understand everything about people, society, and expectations. And I'll insert here, because you're raised that way as like a cis woman, to be like very appeasing to people and to be very hypervigilant. Like you are forced into these roles of being empathetic and understanding, but also trying to keep yourself safe all the time. Being able to see / perceive / understand everything about people and society and expectations of you makes it impossible to not see issues in everything. Seeing issues in everything comes across as you complaining or being pessimistic. Women are seen as complaining too much, but it is a deep understanding that there is no peace, there is no safety, there is no right answer as a woman. To be a woman is to be existential. So I feel that deeply. I have been told my whole life that I'm too negative and too pessimistic, but in actuality, I can see where things are incredibly unfair, and I do try to call it out, and I do express anger and rage over like things being unjust and unfair. Complaining too much is a big one too, because it's like you do not feel settled in your body, in your life, and in society when you're constantly being criticized and told how you're doing something wrong, how you're not doing it right, how you're being a biatch, how you are like always doing something wrong. And that is what this protagonist is talking about. How it doesn't matter how, if she did this, they would view her as that. And that's through her stream of consciousness. She's like, I could do this, but that would make the other people happy, or that would make the other people mad. Like you're constantly always thinking about others, which is so exhausting. Lack of nurture creates anger and resentment. The world is unsafe and no one cares. It is a mentality and a reality. It comes across as selfish or narcissistic to be angry and resentful and to express discomfort, but others' actions and words and the world's function continue to prove that nurture and genuine care and empathy do not actually exist if you are chronically criticized, overlooked, abandoned, or neglected. A painful, consistent rage. And that I can also relate to in almost all of my past relationships. Again, romantically, friendship, familial, lack of nurture does indeed create anger and resentment. And when no one is there to empathize with you, to say like, yes, this is hard, and instead call you over the top or dramatic or like, won't you calm down? It just continuously makes you feel crazy and silly and stupid and angry. And then you just get more angry because you're trying to justify yourself. You're trying so hard to be like, can't you just listen? Can't you just see me? So it's a lot about like being seen and understood, which is so painful and hard and actually very rare, I feel like. I feel like as I've gotten older, I've finally found relationships where I do feel seen and safe. And that has been the most rewarding part of the past few years of my life. But like, it is painful when you are just chronically, you know, again, diving deep into why I personally resonated with the monologue is I remember like almost every time I've been criticized, and it just stored in this filing cabinet. So when I go about my day, I'm like, oh, nope, I was yelled at for doing that, so I'm not going to do that. I was like, well, if I do it this way, I've also been told that that was this way, or I came across this way, so I shouldn't do that either. So even just like the most minuscule action or decision becomes like unbearable. You are cycling through like 16 different things that you could do and how you could be perceived and how you don't want to be perceived that way, or how it could put you in danger. It is exhausting, and that rage is just consistent. That discomfort is consistent, and it just doesn't go away until you find a healthy relationship and a healthy home and a healthy, safe environment, which not everyone is lucky to experience. So the monologue was on my mind for a really, really long time. Okay, lastly, my friends, we have the big kahuna, the big story in here, which is the woman destroyed. Like I said, I've annotated so much in here. This story in particular was such a doozy. This was written in diary format. So we are following our main character, whose name I don't remember anymore, and she finds out that her husband has been having an affair, and she does not understand why. She is still staying with him, yet he is continuously gaslighting her out of her own reality, and she spirals this whole entire bit. This is the longest story in here, almost like half the book. She spirals about like not knowing who she is anymore because he has manipulated and gaslit her to believe she's a certain way, and then she doesn't understand why he's also not leaving her. He then spends his time between both of them, and she's just like, I just want to be with you. Why won't you just be with me? She's hoping that his other relationship will fall off, but he's like actively seeing both of them. But her and her husband have been married for years. So what I wrote about this one, because like I said, I have annotations on like almost every single page because I personally have experienced this. Not to this level, like this exact narrative, but just that feeling of emotional abuse and emotional manipulation where you are so gaslit out of your own reality that you don't know who you are anymore. And the person you're with is telling you you're one way, and you're like, I didn't think I was that way. That's not how I thought I came across at all. Like, what are you talking about? And so then you're going to all these other people and asking them like, how do I come across to you? Like, how do you view me? I don't know who I am anymore, and you can't make decisions, and you are incredibly depressed and incredibly anxious, and you don't want to go out in the world because you are told that you're like a piece of shit, that you're a piece of garbage, and that you're a horrible person, and you're doing mean things intentionally, when actually what it is like reactive abuse. Which, if you want to get into the description of it, it's when there's a perpetrator who is emotionally manipulating or gaslighting. The other person starts to like get really worn down and starts getting very distraught and yelling and upset and sobbing and crying, and is like, what is going on? Like, why are you doing this? I can't believe this. And the other person is like, see, I knew you were crazy. I knew you'd be yelling at me. Look at you. Like, you're such a dramatic mess. That's reactive abuse. Instead of the perpetrator taking accountability for their actions, which this man in here never does. He never takes accountability for himself, never really apologizes. If he does, he says just words, but his actions forever negate what he says. He'll say like, oh, I love you. Yes, I love you. But then he goes and spends all of his time with this other woman. That is, yeah, it's heavy, dude. It's heavy. It is disturbing to see this woman unravel through these diary entries. Her writing style changes. She stops writing dates on her diary anymore. Like, you can see how low she's sinking, where she just no longer exists anymore. She doesn't have a personality anymore. She doesn't know who she is. And that is like the worst feeling in the world, from personal experience as well. So what I wrote about The Woman Destroyed is when empathy becomes catastrophic, when your own empathy becomes weaponized against you. In your own understanding, whether it's forced or intrinsic, you believe others' words instead of their actions. And I think being a cis woman, and then for me personally being a neurodivergent woman, I do tend to believe other people's words way too easily because what I say, I mean genuinely. So when someone says like, I love you, I believe it. When someone says like, I want to spend more time with you, or this is what our future will look like, I tend to believe it. I think that's something that's very inherent with, again, being a cis woman in this like good girl kind of culture, is to undermine your own core values and be empathetic. We were forced to understand others. We were forced to understand how people work, how the world is unsafe, and how maybe we are being overdramatic, how we are being too sensitive, how we are less than in some way. So inherently, you know, mental health is already pretty low, and this might not be everyone's experience. Like I said, this might not be everyone's experience, but I know I have a very different lived experience because I have gone through these things personally several times, many times, especially being neurodivergent. It has happened consistently in my life. So your own empathy, which is such a beautiful thing to have, to be empathetic, is weaponized against you and taken advantage of by people who are manipulators and who are gaslighters, who will manipulate that empathy because you do understand. So you're like, well, yeah, I do believe them. I think I should give them the benefit of the doubt, right? Gaslit into believing the false reality others tell you, so you no longer even know yourself. You can't perceive yourself, and you begin to doubt your own intentions, emotions, and thoughts, believing that you are a bad person, believing everything that they tell you you are. This paired with cis female conditioning from a young age equals The Woman Destroyed. Whoo, wee-oo. That was a lot. Thank you if you made it here. Thank you if you made it to the end of my bit. I honestly could talk about this book forever. I really, really could. And I know that's really heavy and it's really dense, and it's very scary for me to share what I've personally been through, even in this vague way of explaining these are the things that I've gone through, but no specific details or anything. Because if that was a thing, I would be talking for 20 years probably about the experiences I've had with what it feels like to be emotionally manipulated and to lose your sense of identity, especially if your identity is already this strange, bizarre concept to you. It is horrendous, and I am healing, and I have been on a journey of healing. I'm so grateful that that is no longer my lived experience. It's very scary how real this book is. It's very scary how empathetic and humanizing these characters were, how it didn't even feel like fiction to me. It felt like I was reading someone's diary. It felt like I was really reading real women's lives. And it might just be because of my own particular experience of what I personally have gone through. And that's why I think it's really important for me to explain, not just in this vague, philosophical way, why this book is important and why it's important to me, but genuinely, here are the reasons why this hurt so much to read and why it was so beautiful and why it was so painful. So thank you. Thank you for holding space for that if you made it this far. I know that I could have just condensed this into what the stories were about and how it made me feel, but the genuine philosophy behind it is something that really, really fascinates me. Psychology really, really fascinates me. That's why I enjoyed this, is because I can see the intention behind these characters from my own experience, which could be wrong. My interpretation of all of this could be totally wrong, but as somebody who has gone through these experiences, this is how I interpreted it. It's heavy, it's dense, it's beautifully written. 10 out of 10, I highly recommend this book. Was it a 5-star? I don't know. I think more time has to pass for me personally to be that was great. I mean, it was so heartbreaking to read that I don't quite know how I would personally rate it. There is that. I'm gonna be done talking about it now because I could go on forever. So yeah, those were the 5 books that I read in August. Overall, fantastic reading month. Again, this female identity perspective, exploring these topics in beautiful, beautiful ways, incredibly beautiful ways with this these writing styles and these authors, these incredible characters, these really strong characters. I just read amazing books this month. So thank you for being here. Again, if you made it this far, thank you so much. I know that was a lot, but if you'd like to leave a comment but you don't know what to say, please feel free to let us know what your favorite book of August was down below. And or if you don't want to be perceived in that way, if you want to leave emojis based on the cover or the title of your favorite book that you read in August, I think that's really fun. So My favorite book that I read this month was The Woman Destroyed, so I would have done like some lips and a cigarette and maybe like a pink sparkly heart. So yeah, get creative. I love seeing everyone's emojis and comments. It makes me so, so happy. Thank you all again so incredibly much, my friends. I appreciate it more than you know. I would be really curious to hear anyone's thoughts on that, but please be nice. Please be nice. I'm so scared because like I shared so much. Please be nice to me. But I can't wait to see you all again very soon for my next video. Until then, stay cozy, my friends. Bye!